Good evening, and welcome to Granite Media as we have a night of conversation with the candidates. What we are doing tonight is having a conversation with three people who are running for selectmen for the town of Milford. We'll have the role defined in a little bit, but I just want to welcome any viewers who are watching. We're on Channel 8, and we're also going to be streaming on Granite Media. So tonight we have a conversation that we're going to see where it goes with us. We have three wonderful candidates that are well known in the town. I will have them introduce themselves. We'll have a conversation. When we're wrapping up, they'll do a closing, and we hope to see you on March 10th. As you know, voting is on March 10th. It's Tuesday. Our voting hours are from 6 in the morning until 8 o'clock at night. It's the longest voting hours in the state. There's lots of food, snacks, and drink if you go there. It's going to be at the Milford High School. So again, from 6 in the morning to 8 o'clock at night. If you're a registered voter, just walk on in, show an ID. If you're not registered, you still can have same-day registration. Bring a license, bring a birth certificate, bring a proof of residency. And if you're married, just got recently married, probably a marriage certificate as well. And if you're recently divorced, well, that too. And if you're recently married, divorced, and remarried, well, you see where this is going. So at this time, I'd like to introduce the candidates, starting with Mr. Chris Labonte, who's the incumbent. We have Vanessa Sheehan, and we also have Dave Catanzano. And they are going to be challengers. There are 2 seats open for 3-year terms. So let's get started. Chris, I want to open it up to you. Tell us a little bit about what a selectman does and what specific skills or experience do you have bring to the role?
I guess to start off with, the Board of Selectmen is made up of 5 members. We each have 3-year terms. We're on a staggered rotation. Each year we elect 2 members. So it goes to 2 for 3 years, 2 for 3 years, and then 1 for 3 years. It is a paid position, I guess, if you want to say. I kind of call it's volunteer. It's $2,500 a year. The chairman makes $3,000 because they go through, set the agenda, and run the meeting. The select board is responsible for managing the affairs of the town. We carry out what basically the voters, the legislative body, has gone through and enacted at town meeting in March. Basically in March, 2-part, SB2. We have February or end of January, our deliberative session, and then we have our voting in March. We're in charge of regulating the roads as far as ordinances, parking bans, things like that. We present the budget and the warrant articles to the voters. We are in charge of licensing for events, parade permits, other things of that nature. We manage regulate the use of town property. And election day, we're responsible for being at the polls. As far as, I believe there's got to be 3 selectmen members present at the polls at all times. The other things that we do is we appoint members to other committees, as far as like the planning board, conservation, and all different subcommittees. That's basically in a nutshell. We take care of the finances, obviously, of the town. We're responsible for, basically, we're a steward of the town's money.
And what's the town's budget roughly this year?
21 million and change. $21,369,930 actually proposed.
Fantastic. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running.
I have been a resident of Milford for 47 years, give or take. I built a house in 2010 with the love of my life, Marcy. I have a daughter, 2 grandkids. I have my own business I've had going on year number 30 this year. So I'm pretty stuck in my ways that I don't really move around much. I'm pretty stuck in what I do.
And it must be a ground maintenance business, as noted with the swag of the cup and the jacket.
All of this stuff tends to travel with me.
Awesome. Well, let me move on over to Vanessa. Vanessa, Ms. Sheehan, tell us what makes skill experience you have and what brings you to this role.
Well, I'm Vanessa Sheehan. I'm a 3rd-generation Milford resident. I graduated from Milford High School. Back then it was known as MASH. I went on to get a degree in broadcasting communications. I just completed my 6th year on the Budget Advisory Committee. I'm also a member of the Milford Historical Society. In my third term as a state representative, and I serve as vice chair of the Legislative Administration Committee. I'm an executive board member of the Hillsborough County Delegation, and in my spare time, I'm a realtor licensed in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. The reason why I'm running for the select board, for me, it's another way to serve my town, give back to the community, and I could bring my experience and leadership skills to the board.
Awesome. Mr. Catanzano.
Sure. My name's Dave Catanzano, live on Panema Hill. I have, I guess, relative to these two, super new. This is going to be my 8th year in Milford, neighboring town in Merrimack for almost 30 years. We moved to Milford, my wife and I moved to Milford to get away from what we saw was a community growing too fast for us. And Milford had that little tight-knit community feel for us. So that's
Recording
why we
in
came out,
progress.
and bought a house here to live. And what makes, I guess, my qualifications to run for selectman is I've had a heck of a career managing multi-million-dollar companies as COO, managing large-scale budgets, running companies and employing thousands of people, making the hard decisions, uncomfortable decisions to make sure that those businesses stayed in business. I'd like to serve as selectman to help Milford continue to do the same. You know, I've spent a lot of time talking to my neighbors, going to restaurants and talking to residents and hearing some of their worries in the increase in taxes. Any way that I can help manage that, give some advice to manage that, I think would be helpful for the town. I just see such potential here. I see, potential for growth and potential to keep that small town feel at the same time. So that's really why I want to get involved. In a nutshell.
Okay, well, let me stay with you. You left Merrimack, you came to Milford because Merrimack was growing too fast.
Mm-hmm.
What are things in Milford that attracted you to Milford? And earlier you just said that you'd like to grow it fast, but keep the small town charm. What ideas do you have for things like that?
So I think in coming to Milford, knowing that it was a small community, small tight-knit community, that's what drew us here. To keep it small, in the areas we live in, is to keep it small. There's some talks about expanding housing, cluster housing, ADUs, and letting them grow, shrinking the size of acreage which you can put property on. I think we can manage that to still bring in residents without blowing that apart and exploding into, thousands and thousands of new residents, which would be a burden on the use of the town roads, the community, and would cause more heartache than what I believe is necessary.
Well, let's look to a resident expert with Vanessa here, who is a real estate agent. Can you address some of the concerns that Dave has and give us a little bit of enlightenment about the situation of our town in terms of housing and such?
Housing, yeah, well, I think that we really need to be smart in how we grow. Housing needs have to stay balanced. We need a little residential, some rental, some mixed use. But if we don't manage growth wisely, taxpayers will always be the backstop. And in my experience as a realtor, there are several factors that drive the housing market. Interest rates, inventory, supply and demand. And I'm seeing changes in the market already. I'm seeing houses are staying on the market longer, inventory is increasing, interest rates are starting to come down. So, and also buyers are having more of a chance in getting an offer accepted. So I think that we're seeing some positive change in the housing market that's going to make a difference here in town.
What's your thoughts on balance between ownership, people who are owning houses versus rentals in our town? Like, do you feel like, do we have enough of one or the other, or?
Well, Milford tends to have more rentals, more apartments than other surrounding towns, Amherst, Hollis, for example. I guess that the zoning questions that are going to be on the town ballot this March, residents are going to weigh in on that. But there's one zoning question about, bringing 32 units, rental units, on 1 acre lots around the downtown area. That's going to affect the feel of the downtown area, I believe. So again, we need to be prudent in how we grow.
Would you be in favor of that or not?
I want to keep our small town feeling, and I think that most importantly, right now, we need to focus on our infrastructure to support more housing, to support more rental units if that zoning article were to pass. And I think we're starting to do that, to look at our infrastructure, pay attention to that, what we're doing at the water department, the upgrades there, the new pump station. There's a warrant on the ballot this March that's going to take, hopefully take care of some water mains up in the highland areas of town. So we're looking at that, and we need to really start there first, infrastructure, to make sure that that is in place before we really start to grow.
Chris, you're nodding. Thoughts on this?
As far as the housing standpoint, a lot of what I would like to see is as Vanessa said, I love the small town feel that Milford has. What I worry about is it changing. As we all know, taxes are high. Everybody's taxes jumped in 25, and unfortunately, progress for say costs money for say inflation and all of that stuff. What I worry about is one of the zoning changes Vanessa brought up, and she brought up the going from currently our zoning is 5 units per acre for multi-tenant buildings in the downtown overlay, and they want to bring it to 35 units per acre. I believe that can change a lot of situations. It's going to, the thought process on the numbers, the thoughts have come out saying, well, there's places that already have 114 units per acre when you do the math out on them. I think, in my own opinion, I think some of those numbers are skewed because it included senior housing, where I feel the senior housing from the Mill Apartments and Granite Square and stuff like that were included in that number, and I feel that that's a different dynamic. That's not really what I call market rate housing. That's to help our seniors have an affordable place to live. So ultimately, I feel by increasing the numbers just in the overall area that they want to do for this overlay, it's going to create more rental units, which unfortunately, rental units, when you look at the cost per unit on what comes in on taxes, it actually, in my opinion, puts more of a burden on the town. It's not bringing in as much money. What I'd actually like to see is actually more commercial industrial, as far as whether we rejuvenate a lot of the vacancies that we have in our commercial industrial, or develop areas, you hear talk about the Brock's property, there's other areas, whether it be South Street, Route 13 South, there's other areas that we have to develop, which ultimately will bring in more tax positive net positive numbers. To me, it just comes down to we have to watch where we're going. You want to have a split of your commercial industrial versus your residential. And right now, we are actually going to start going the other way. 26 is a reassessment year for Milford. As we all know, the housing prices have gone up. The commercial industrial prices really haven't changed much. So when you look at our equalization rate on who pays what for taxes in the town of Milford, commercial industrial is, in theory, actually going to be paying less. Right now, I think they pay like ballpark 17% of the tax liability in Milford, and the residential units are paying the 70% of it when it really comes down to. So the valuation on your house, if you were sitting here before, you're going to be up here, versus that commercial industrial was here, and they might be here after the reevaluation. So that delta between the two. So to me, I honestly think, from a housing standpoint, we're a commuter town. I was part of the master plan steering committee, attended all the master plan meetings, planning board meetings as far as for the master plan itself. And I've learned a lot of stuff about Milford. 90% of Milford commutes out of Milford to work. So when the theory comes in, if we got to build more houses in Milford to have more houses for our workers, why don't we try and intrigue the businesses here to try and grab some of the workers that we have that already live in town? I don't know why we really have to bring in more units.
Okay. Dave, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so as Chris and Vanessa were speaking, building up around the circle, I don't know how long it took you to park, but I went around the circle or the oval 4 times, went up to the library, came back out, went down, back over, back down, around, up to right. I couldn't find a parking spot.
Wow.
So we explode the housing around. What are we going to do, as we were talking earlier, infrastructure? How are we going to manage the roads? How are we going to manage the folks getting around town without creating what was created in Merrimack? And the reason why I left, they just put huge apartment buildings and did nothing with the roads, and you sit in traffic for 45 minutes. And this is an hourglass. You're going to sit in traffic for a while. So that would make me nervous. I do think we should definitely look into commercial outside where the commercial areas are. And I do think that we should be very smart and considerate when thinking about planting new apartment buildings and housing for that matter as a whole.
One of Chris's points that he was making was that businesses would be paying lower taxes and try to rejuvenate businesses. If you look around town, we do have a few empty storefronts. And so to open it up to anybody, how do we attract businesses to fill those storefronts? Dave, take it.
If I may, so part of my expertise is building businesses, and what's attractive for me in business is, I know that taxes is a little bit of a controversy, but you have to give a benefit to a company to come into that town and to plant and stay. And then as they grow with us. Somebody had made a comment during a conversation I had with them is, if we tax a business out of town, well, so be it. I don't know how you bring those two things together. You have to incentivize the business to stay. It doesn't mean you let them sit there for free. It doesn't mean that you undercharge them their taxes either. You find a happy medium into them having a strong business, helping them grow, support local business, and then taxing them appropriately to help take the burden off of the homeowners or those who have buildings in Milford.
Vanessa.
Yeah, I think that we're going to see, as the economy starts to get better, I think we're going to see more businesses either coming in or even expanding. I mean, I just saw that Sun's Chimney grew and moved out of the Oval area and is up near Hitchner's in a bigger storefront. And three new businesses on town. We get the new ice cream parlor, which makes really good vanilla shakes. And the two little stores that are in the old fishbowl. But I think that, last year, New Hampshire welcomed 6 new companies as businesses flee the surrounding states and brought in hundreds of jobs. So I think maybe it is time to start look at the Brock's property. I know that there's some empty industrial space up near the Citronics area. So I think that we're going to see businesses start to come back.
I think there's always a story behind everything, Dave, right? When you hear a lot of people talk in Milford and they're like, the downtown's vacant, you got a gas station on the north side of the Oval. There's a story behind a lot of that stuff. Contrary to what people believe, the gas station still pays the lease, the taxes are still paid. It may not be the most eye-appealing situation, but how can you do that? That's corporate America that ultimately is keeping a lease going to obviously secure a property. The other problem that we have in Milford, sometimes is a good problem, is some of the establishments that we have on the Oval, the rental space themselves, they're small. So we have a lot of creative people around town that will come in and they'll start a business. So you don't want them to leave, but actually it's the best thing that you can have for them is they start, they grow, and actually outgrow where they are. So those are the opportunities you can take, and whether they can move into different places in town. Obviously, you hope that you can always try and find a place in town to keep them so that they don't have to move. But I think that is one of the drawbacks in our downtown is since we hit the whole .com era, shopping online, this and that, a lot of your mom and pop shops, I remember growing up, you used to be able to go, you could go down to the Oval, you could go to the hardware store. There was so many, the hardware store, the pharmacy, 2 pharmacies on the Oval, really, when it comes down to it. There was everything was circulated right on the Oval. So much of that has changed now. I think it's just the retail world as we know it. But I'm definitely in favor of, whatever we can do. We have a couple units on the Oval that have been empty for a long series of time. It's not necessarily that they're empty due to nobody wants to come and rent them. There's a backstory on, I'm going to say a handful of them that have been empty. There's always a backstory, and it's not always monetary on why they're empty.
Okay. Well, this conversation's been going about growth of our town. So let's just look at that for a second. Over the next 3 years, if you are chosen as one of the select people of the town, over the next 3 years, what priorities would you have for the town? Like, what would you prioritize? Roads, public buildings, utilities. Like, what were things that would be a priority for you over the next 3 years? Vanessa, you want to?
Yeah, I would like to focus on finding new revenue streams. I'd like to take a look at our impact fees to make sure that the fees are keeping pace with costs so that taxpayers aren't subsidizing specific services. Are we utilizing our user fees as we should? So I'd really like to work on that. Continuing to look at our infrastructure and maintaining our roads, maintaining our sidewalks. I've been working for the state and at the county level. I've been able to help different departments in town secure grants, so I'd really like to continue to pursue looking at every opportunity we can to find grants to help, the taxpayers. And again, some smaller projects, I'd like to see the town increase their social media presence, and I would like to see Granite Town Media get their own TV studio too. Those are just some smaller,
You're just being nice.
smaller projects.
Are there
yeah.
any grants that you're happy with that you were talking about getting grants and so on? Are there any grants that you're proud of that our town has received?
Yes, assisting the library secured an over $800,000 grant for a new HVAC system. Was able to help the water department with $1 million for their new water pump station, and also helped emergency services with a grant for their new CAD upgrade.
Awesome. Dave?
Yeah, it's very similar revenue stream, infrastructure, roads. The revenue stream is going to be attracting businesses, and I know as the economy gets better, businesses will look for places to plant themselves and grow. We want to be attractive, right? We need to make ourselves attractive. As far as the infrastructure goes, take a look at what is needed, not what we want, what is needed, and attack those issues. And the roads, we had a big conversation at one of the last meetings I was at. If we seemingly we budget to repave or repair a road about 1.5 miles at a time on an annual basis, which I think is silly. We have a lot of roads that need work and care. We need to figure that out, and that's going to, put a lot of heads around the table. And
So let me pull out
Budget
some of your
properly.
expertise from
Sure.
your job. You heard Chris talk about the businesses paying a lower tax, and you're talking about getting a revenue stream. When you hear that, what are your thoughts or ideas of trying to maybe increase the revenue stream?
yeah, so increasing the revenue stream, i.e. bringing businesses in and having them help with certain parts of the road or intersections where they land, as part of them landing, I've paid for sidewalks, I've paid for roads. That's an ask that you can ask, and if the business is a good business, they will. They will help expand the infrastructure to help traffic move through the city better, or that part of the town that they're in even better. So having that come in and not be a burden on the taxpayer would be very, very beneficial.
And what's the carrot you hang over their head to attract them to Milford?
Yeah, so right now, and I've said it before in public, there is no carrot. That's something that we need to put, in my very strong opinion, some minds around the table. And we need to talk about it. For me, it would be me saying, hey, Dave, I've got a great town for you to come work in. Drop your business here. There's plenty of people looking for work. We have a strong community that will support your business. Is that what we have right now? And if we have that, I can sell that business to this town.
Okay.
So that would be my go forward.
Chris, your thoughts?
So the first thing I just want to clarify, just so nobody misconstrues it, is the businesses are paying the same tax
No,
rate.
you're
No,
right.
I just wanted to put
Yeah,
that out to
yeah.
the public. Everybody in town pays the same tax rate. It just has to do how evaluation is actually configured.
Yes.
I just didn't want people to think that,
Yeah.
commercial industrial actually pay less. So I guess it's to start with that. Secondly, infrastructure is a big thing to me. Both Vanessa and Dave have touched upon roads. I think roads are probably one of our most critical infrastructure things that we have to deal with in town. It was brought up that we plan on doing, we end up doing 1 mile to 1.5 miles or 1.75 miles a year. We have 90 miles in town. If we keep going at the rate we're on, we're not going to get there. But what we have to do also is we still have to find the balance of what we can put out as far as to the taxpayers to actually pay. There's only so much you can get out of a pocket, so we have to find the balance. This year, from our perspective of doing the budget, the warrant articles and whatnot, different board members have, agreed on different things and disagreed on others. But when it really comes down to it, we're all in it, I'm going to say, for the same thing, is the betterment of the town. We got to find different ways of how we can get funding for stuff. Grants, as Vanessa mentioned, the grant for water utilities, the library. We got a grant this year from the Volkswagen Settlement Fund for a DPW truck, so that saved taxpayers like $220,000. And to me, the world of grants, what we've got for grants over the last 5 years in Milford, I feel have been huge. We've talked before, at what point do we start to look into, and once again, becomes an expense at one point, do we ever look into a grant writer? Do we look into a company that you hire a third party even to try and find grants? There's so much free money out there. Not saying that we're eligible to get it all the time, but if you don't put in for it, you're not going to get it. From a revenue standpoint, it becomes tough. There's a lot of talks at times on, we can raise permit fees. We can raise this, we can raise that. Permit fees, when it really comes down to it, if you raise a building permit fee, if it's a new house that you're building, your building permit fee, you raise it, the developer's going to say, okay, no problem, we're going to take it. They're going to add it on the house. So the developer's never really going to be the one that pays the fee. It's always the end user. So no matter how you look at it, it's still really sort of a tax, right? So I don't know the answer on where we come up with some of the revenues on it. I think really if we sit and we look, we've done a lot of changes in the past year as far as technology, as far as software, accounting software, time clock software, ClearGov, which is supposed to put out a whole lot more transparency. I feel the town, even though I may not have agreed on some of how we got to these, I do agree that going forward that it's going to be a benefit to the town. The clearer that we have stuff, the easier that we can put out to the public. Anybody that knows me and every year that I've run, a lot of it comes down to it's building trust through transparency. The more transparent you can be with a taxpayer, the more trust you actually gain out of them.
Did you want to comment?
Yeah, well, I strongly agree that property tax relief needs to be addressed, and as you know, the town portion of the tax bill is about 23% of the entire tax bill. But, looking at the impact fees, I'd also like to see us funding our capital reserves yearly. I know that through the budget season, those are usually the first things to be taken off the warrant, but I think that saving a little each year helps the blow to the taxpayer when we need a new fire truck, when we need a new dump truck. Last year, the town approved a revolving fund for the ambulance department where they would put a portion of their revenue into the revolving fund to save up for a new ambulance, and I'd like to see more things like that. Seeking efficiencies in town operations, I thought it was a great idea and it's working out beautifully for the DPW department and the water department to team up. So when the water department's putting in a new water main, then DPW will pave that stretch of road. So looking at things like that, the finance software, it's a little bit of an expense up front, but it's going to save money in the long run. Those are efficiencies I think that we can, look for more.
Dave, your thoughts?
Yeah, so on taxes, I'm passionate about it, and a lot of people out there are passionate about it, and they have told me so. In doing some quick calculations, my taxes since I've been here in 7.5 years now, almost 8, has gone up 46%. For me, I guess I'm fortunate. I can pay it, but other people can't. And that's one of the other reasons why I want to get this involved, is taking a look at why has it gone up so quickly? What can we do? What hard decisions can we make to help ease that burden? If nothing, level it off. I heard Chris say earlier that we're going to have a reassessment and our taxes are going to go up again. Well, that's going to be tough for a lot of people to swallow. And what I also hear is they're going to have to sell their homes and move out of Milford. Is that what kind of community we want to be? I was actually in a meeting and I had made a statement to somebody because somebody said, well, we're going to have to raise taxes on houses that are worth over $300,000, or they were going to sweep the difference of $300,000 to $600,000, meaning a house is worth $900,000. So they're going to take more from the people who have a house that's worth more money, that the person hasn't realized that gain, because when they bought it, it was worth X. Now it's worth X. That doesn't make sense, and it's not fair to the residents. So I think in making those hard decisions, taking a hard look at the wants and the needs of the town, that's not easy. And I'm sure nobody wants to hear what I'm saying, but taking a hard look and saying yeses and nos, meaningful yeses and nos of what needs to be done, whether it's with another department, i.e. the school board, or it's with the town, we have to take a look and we have to say no know when it's right to say no.
And as you know, you just mentioned school board, and obviously that is an elephant in the room, where the school board has about a $55 million ballpark budget. The town, as Chris said earlier, was about 21 million. So quick math puts it at about $76 million in terms of a tax structure in our town. How mindful are the three of you of that number? And what are your thoughts on is that fair? How do we reduce it? How do we, Dave?
Yeah, so I don't say this to brag, but running a $100 million company, right? That's a lot of money to look at. You have to budget all that money, and you have to budget it wisely. If you don't budget it wisely, you're out of business, right? Just because $100 million sounds like a ton of money, doesn't it? But when you actually go through and you complete that budget to stay in business, there are some things you have to say no to. So, not popular. I have taken companies from, a $55 million budget to a zero-based budget, meaning you spend money only when you get the proper approvals, and the approvals have to go through a process. And I think, we have a process, but I do think we have some times when we say yes, when we should say no.
But as a selectman, what mindful things will you do to try to keep that, level versus crazy numbers?
Sure, I'm super simple. What's a need? What's a want? If I want it, probably not going to happen. My wife tells me all the time, you want it? Sorry. If we need it, we're going to get it. And if we need it, we have to pay for it. And that's easy to tell the residents. Look, we need this, and this is why we need this. We need a new fire truck, or we're not going to get to a house on time to put out a fire. We need to pave 10 miles of road, or we're going to have roads that are literally falling apart. That's an easier conversation than just to throw a bunch of warrant articles out and say, well, this, and have the community look at those warrant articles and go, I don't even know what this means. So either they're going to vote all no, they're going to close their eyes and check something, or they're going to vote all yes. We just have to communicate better, communicate clearly of what our needs are and what our wants are.
Chris, when I think we interviewed last time 3 years ago, the budget was around 15 or 18 million. Do you recall?
I want to say it was 16 million.
Okay, so
is around there. Yep.
What's changed from 16 to 21?
I can tell you some of the drivers from the past year, meaning for the proposed year. We have that reevaluation, $89,000. Once again, small in the broad spectrum, but keep in mind that's cash, meaning that's not the fact of it's not financed out, not bonded or anything. We have $662,000 in employee benefits as far as like healthcare, dental, all things included in that. Debt service, keep in mind, people don't sometimes realize that when you go through and you approve different things. We approved a fire truck, we approved a DPW dump truck, we approved a new ambulance. Ultimately, we may approve those, and you may approve them in, let's say, 22. But you may not actually hit the tax rate until 25, with some of the lead times on some of the stuff that doesn't come in for sometimes 2 years. So even though you voted on it before, you may not start paying on it until we bond it. So we have an increase just in that of over $300,000 just on those three vehicles. Insurance, as far as Primex, property and liability, we're up over $66,000. Once again, the accounting softwares, the accounting, timekeeping, that was like $154,000. So ultimately, what is going to save us on that's going to be a 1-year cost on that. But yet, when you look at it and you schedule it out after, and you say, what are your savings going to be after? That's actually going to hopefully, compared to Munis, what we're paying now, is hopefully going to become a savings for us in the end.
Are you happy with the growth that you've seen in terms of the percentage of the town budget? I'm not talking about the school budget, town budget.
Well, the town budget, we also hit, I don't know if you've paid attention to some of the budget meetings, we've hit the perfect storm this year. But we have an additional payroll this year. So that's overall, there's one more payroll than normal. That's $331,000 right off the bat that we have zero control over. Cost of living raises and benefits ultimately come out to another $288,000. One other thing when you look at on the town budget, different than the school, is I'm not positive on the numbers, I can't tell you right off the top of my head, but ultimately out of the $21 million that we have for the budget, we raised almost $10 million through registrations, permit fees, and all the other stuff. So you're not paying that $21 million all out of taxation. On the school side, yes, we get supplemented some, we get $4,000 whatever dollars per pupil or something. We don't get anywhere near the $50 million, I guess is what I should say, as far as the offsetting thing for the town. I think that the town side, we have a lot of expenditures, I feel, over time that we've put off. You know, prior boards, myself on some of these boards, you look at the budget, you look at the things that are put in front of you and say, you know, like Dave said, are they wants and needs? You know, let's face it, there's some of both when it comes down to it. We want to keep up on our infrastructure, so we go as much as we can. The problem is we actually may not be putting as much as we need to. We're putting what we want to. And some of the things we're actually going backwards in. I hate to say that, and I'm probably not going to make a lot of friends over that, but it's reality when it comes down to it, is, you know, you spend, it takes money to make money. Going back to you asking about development as far as commercial, industrial, stuff like that, we do have some things in place. We have a 79E that you can get, which is, it's a deduction as far as on, if you come in and you take an old building and you rehab it and whatnot, you can get like a tax break. So it's an incentive ultimately over like 5 years, depending on what you do. We have different things, but every tool you use, once again, is going to cost you somewhere in between. So you have to weigh out the difference.
Vanessa, what are your thoughts? Have you looked at the big picture like this?
The budget, yeah, I mean, I'm on the budget advisory
Right.
committee, so we look at the budget, but, you know, we need to be disciplined in our spending, and our budget has to stay close to or under inflation, certainly not above it. This year, like Chris said, was the perfect storm. There were things that we couldn't control, like the extra payroll, the revaluation, and, you know, things that the town already voted in last year, or the year before, is coming due now. So I don't think that next year budget will be that much higher. You know, it all depends on what's voted in this year, but this year was like the perfect storm. Yeah.
Yeah, so just, Chris, thank you for saying those numbers out loud. That's about $1.3 million. We went from 16 to 21. That's a difference of 3.8 million. Residents want to know where that money went. Where is it? I think we just need to be more clear. And I say that, I don't say that as meh. I say that as, that's $3.8 million that we need to know where it went. So when we're in charge of looking at a budget, and I have to say to a board, hey man, we're $3.8 million over, you know, we had some unforeseeable expenditures, or we just have something hit that wouldn't normally hit for what, 9, 10 years? This one payroll hits every 10 years.
Yep.
Once every 10 years. That's explainable, and it's understandable. But not telling me where the $3.8 million is in my book, and I had to tell that to a board, not acceptable. So those are things that I would want to make sure I understand, I know, and working with the finance department to understand, for me, where the money went, so that I can, back to the transparency, tell the residents this is what it is. And if it's acceptable, it's acceptable. And back to the needs and the wants, as Chris was saying, I don't think the roads are necessarily, like, it's not a, for me, that's not a want. That's a need. I go up and down some of these roads and they're not good. And I say, I can get through another winter, but I do think there's going to have to be a moment in time where we're going to have to get together and say, we have to do this, and other things may have to sit on the sidelines to get it done.
So, to the board, well, to the three folks here, how do you manage a decision where you have a number of people in town that may disagree with raising taxes? And so, how do you approach that in terms of trying to sell that to someone who is on a fixed income, who, you know, may just have retired and now living on again, another fixed income in terms of a retirement account? Like how do you approach that, where you see that we have certain things that we need, and we obviously have fixed expenses, which are really pushing our costs, just like the same with the school. How do you approach that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
It's an easier conversation to have when I don't look somebody in the eyeballs and say, oh, by the way, your taxes are going to go up another $1,000. I know, ignore the 46% over the last 7 years. It's an easier conversation to say, hey, listen, this is something that needs to be done. Your taxes have been steady for a while with a slight bump here and there, a slight bump here and there. It's easier to say, we're going to have a one-time catch-up $1,000 hit to taxes. This is going to go into an escrow, and it's going to be for the roads. That's an easier conversation to have. That's where I come from in big business. That's exactly what you do. You set up these different accounts to make sure that you have money to expand your business, capital accounts. They're widely known in business, and if allowable in a town, you do that. And again, it's an easier conversation if I just didn't look at somebody and say, hey man, your taxes went up 46%. If you can't afford it, sell your house. But where your taxes are going up.
Okay.
Well, the conversation really starts in September. I mean, we hold weekly budget committee meetings. We have our town deliberative session. Our new town administrator did a great presentation on budget drivers this year, explaining the budget. And all of these meetings are televised, or you can watch online. So the conversation starts in September, and citizens can come to the deliberative. They can actually change. They have the power to change numbers at the deliberative session. So nothing is really hidden from the taxpayer.
I'm actually going to pull Vanessa's conversation back even a little bit farther. The conversation really starts in July when it starts, even June and July with CIP. And as crazy as it sounds, you start with your long-term planning out of it. And she's right, because what you find, you're going to find there's a handful in the town of Milford. And we all know who they are, who we are and whatnot, that go to all of these. I've gone to all the CIP, all the budget advisory. Obviously, I go to the Board of Selectmen's meetings. So you ask, actually, how do you look at a taxpayer and say, it's actually, I'm going to say it's going to be a little bit easier for myself, probably, than it's going to be easier for me than it is for Vanessa, but it's going to be harder for Dave. And I don't mean that in a categorical thing. It just really comes down to, I see all the numbers that come in. I've had the pleasure of being on the board, which there's advantages and disadvantages, Dave, because sometimes you actually see too much stuff. So when you look at the manifest and you actually see all of the bills come in, it's an eye-opening experience for me, which I call it, that's a privilege of being on the board, that you see these numbers. And when you have a budget presented to you, a budget book, and you're looking and, oh, wow, there's $300,000 in that line item, you think to yourself going, what possibly do they need that money for? But I will tell you that going through that manifest and seeing each one of those expenses and signing off on it, it's an eye-opening thing that shows you, what's there. It's still tough, though, to look at a taxpayer and say, hey, you know what, we all got to pay our own way. But that's what it comes down to in the end. There's so many different things. Increases. When you look at our increase this year, our budget is 9.16% over 25's budget. That's what our proposed budget is. But if our budget fails, it's still 8.32% over 25's budget. Our default budget is like 0.75% lower than our proposed budget. So what that actually means, and that translates into, is your default budget is what's mandated by law. It is your last year's budget plus mandatory increases. So it's not like we have substantial increases. I rattled off some of the increases before, but to look at the public and say, why is it so expensive? Well, if you follow the meetings, you'll see that New Hampshire in its own, a lot of the municipalities had an expense of the insurance company provider that ultimately folded and went out of business. So that cost the town a whole, not just us, but municipalities all throughout the state cost a lot more money because, once again, it's pooled insurance, basically self-insured, as a matter of speaking. But when you look at the numbers really, they're expensive over what the 25 budget was. But when you literally come down, as Vanessa said, Lori's presentation, which I've rattled off most of the budget drivers that she has come up with, I give her credit for all of those. But ultimately, when you see the numbers and you actually do the math on those, the math is there. It's not like we're just pulling this pot of money saying that, I think we can spend this, I think we can have it. I think that, it was a challenge, and we butted heads on a lot of doing this, on what to do. But, Vanessa brought up the fact of deliberative session. There's probably in the room, I'm not sure what the official count was, but there probably was 90-something people at the town deliberative session. And when you take out what I call the Budget Advisory Committee, the Board of Selectmen, town staff that's associated with budget presentations, there's minimal. There was a lot this year. I'm going to guess maybe 30 residents that I'm going to call it aren't really associated or affiliated with town stuff. But they had the power to change stuff. They changed a warrant article for social services. It had got lowered this year due to the request for it, and ultimately they made a change, and they raised it back up. Same thing at the school deliberative session. We walked out of the school deliberative session this year $125,000 more than what the school actually asked for. So their participation from the public is huge.
To go along with that, and I feel like I'm going to bring this down a little bit, unfortunately, we had about 70 people at the school deliberative session. We had about 90 people maybe at the town. You were commenting on how important it is that we have the meetings and that we start the budget process and we have everybody's involvement. We have about 10,500 or so voters in town. In the 2024 election, we had almost 10,000 people vote, ridiculous numbers. In the March meeting, we had about 2,500 people vote on a roughly about, back then, about 70-something million dollars. Madison has always said the government closest to you affects you the most. As a board, is there any ideas or thoughts you can maybe throw out to increase this participation? Or are we just stuck?
No, I don't think we're stuck. I think we need to get our residents excited about being part of the process. I've been at several meetings, I've witnessed some folks, their questions not handled well. And when their questions aren't handled well with, I hear you, we'll get back to you, or something along the lines of, we heard you, they walk out of here and want nothing to do with the town, per se. Of course, they still live here, they have a house here. So that's one thing that we have to be very mindful of when somebody does. It takes a lot of nerve to do this. It takes a lot of nerve to get up to that microphone. And for those who are seasoned at it, maybe it doesn't take as much nerve. But for those folks who do have a concern and they get up to that microphone and they have a question or a comment, and it doesn't come out exactly right, they shouldn't be talked down to or berated. They should be brought into the fold a little bit more so that they understand more. Where I come from, I'm going to listen to you, I'm going to understand you, and if I can answer you there, I'm going to answer you there. If not, I will guarantee you, I will get back to you and give you an answer. I do think there is a faction of the town who are just going to do their daily and whatever, but I do think there's a yearning for another faction to be involved. We have to get them excited, right? So I'm out there talking to 100, 200, 300 people. And I said the same thing. You got to come to the meetings, man. If you can say all you want here, and I can translate that back, but if you don't come to the meetings and have your voices heard, and then that's when they say, well, they talk down, they don't look, I don't get the answers that I'm looking for. You don't always get the answers you're looking for, but at least you get an answer. I do think we have to get the residents excited about coming to meetings. And as I said, this is deja vu because I said it last time, you're gonna have to expand this room if we can get more residences here. Maybe we have the meetings upstairs. So it is about getting people excited to come to these meetings.
That's good.
Granite Town Media, I feel, has made a huge impact on the town of Milford. When I started getting involved in town meetings, or selectmen's meetings, was probably around 2008, 2009 timeframe. And back then it was actually tough because you would go and you'd come sit in the audience. And I'll never forget, Dave, the first selectmen's meeting I came to. I came in, I sat in the audience, and I was sitting probably halfway back because you don't want to get too close because you don't know what's going on. And at the board at the time, I had one of the board members come up to me just before the meeting started, and they said, "Can I help you?" And I said, I was scared for a minute. I didn't know if I was in the right room. And ultimately, they're like, "What are you here for?" And I said, in all honesty, I said, "This is going to sound really crazy." I said, "I thought it was just an open public meeting." I said, "I just wanted to come and just watch it and see what happens." And I will say they were very nice about it because they said, "Oh, no, you're always welcome to come." As Dave said, that microphone over in the corner where you come up to speak, that is the most intimidating microphone in this room. And I will still say there's days that I still come to different committee and commission meetings that I speak at that microphone, and you sometimes get a response that is unwelcoming. I feel the town has been trying to do very well. Going back to my first meeting, you didn't know what the agenda was. There were so many people talking at the table, and they'd be like, "Oh, well, on page 16 of this, this number," you had no idea. So through our town website, Granite Town Media, we've now got to the point where our agenda's put on there, the packet's put on there. You can follow it from home, watching it on TV. I feel that there's a whole lot. I feel I've pushed this last year a whole lot. Lori's been fantastic. I'll look at Lori and I'll be like, "Lori, can we put this on the town Facebook page?" We do have a lot of resources in town, private pages as far as like the Milford Residents page. I have nothing against the Milford Residents page, but as a board member, I feel all of our information should be put out on an official town page. If it wants to get shared to all these other pages, that's fine, but we need to have a source that's valid. But how you engage, Dave, I don't understand. I don't know. If you go back to a couple years ago when the fire horn concept came up at deliberative session, the one mistake that was made at that deliberative session that year, I feel, is they rotated the agenda around to take that warrant article first. So, because it was packed up there. People were standing everywhere. All the chairs were full. We never see that. So they made the decision to change the order to take the fire horn first. They took the fire horn first, and 125 people walked out after. The best thing they could have done is left that fire horn right where it was, had them sit through the budget. You probably would have found out of the 100 and some people that left, you might have got 10 people that were like, wow, we never knew what happened in town government. Because, I'm going to be honest, until we hit like 2008 or something like that, I never went to a deliberative session. I didn't know what it was. But I think education is a lot of it, and you've got to make people feel comfortable in a way to get information out. We've lost a lot since we don't have the Milford Cabinet anymore. Yeah. The Milford Cabinet used to inform a lot of the people a whole lot better. But newspapers, unfortunately, how many people have a newspaper subscription now? Exactly. So it is tough, but I feel like we're trying with the different avenues that we have, with our Nixle updates or Everbridge or whatever. Like, I feel that as a town, we're trying to get more information out there. But you have to have the people read it and want to be part of it. That's the hard part.
Yeah, I agree. Our social media presence, and our website has all the documents. You can go back and look at any meeting minutes. Yeah. So the information is getting out there. I think we just got to make people more aware that it's there.
All right, we have to take a little bit of sides here now, so this is going to be personality. So be careful, Vanessa. I'll start with you. Your go-to pizza place in town.
Milano's.
And what do you get?
Onion and pepperoni.
Dave.
Papa Joe's. No.
Pizza.
Yep. Pizza's a hamburger. Yeah.
Okay. All righty. Chris.
Milano's.
And what do you get there?
Ham, peppers, and onion.
And while you were preparing for this debate, this chat tonight, what was the flavored pint of ice cream you were eating? Dave?
I haven't had a pint of ice cream in, it's got to be 3 or 4 years. I know, I hate it. I went to the grocery store today and I walked by, I was like, I want some ice cream. I just walked by.
That's why you're in good shape.
My willpower is saying no.
So peppermint stick says otherwise.
Peppermint stick, undoubtedly, is my favorite flavor.
Twix Ice Cream Bars has formed this.
Yeah, very nice.
Vanilla.
And vanilla, perfect. Okay, now that we're back on a happier note as opposed to that, that voting question just breaks my heart. So I'm sorry, just being watching the people come and go. Over the next 3 years, if you're elected, what's going to be a pet project of yours? Dave, go ahead.
It's going to come back to
money.
It's not popular, but it's going to come back to budget and me understanding every single line item to be able to articulate that back to the residents when the question is asked. That is my background. That is what I do, and then also a big background in bringing teams together and helping form relationships. I liked what I heard earlier about the water department and the road department working together. That's a big pet peeve of mine, is getting people to work together and understand that we're all one. Milford is one community, and we should all work together in that way. So that's what I would look forward to do.
Okay, Vanessa.
Yeah, again, like I said, looking for new revenue streams, infrastructure, grants, but also we have great volunteers in town. The volunteers really make our town run, but I would like to see some new volunteers. And this past budget cycle, we had 2 new members to the budget committee, and it was great because they had new questions, new perspective on things. So I think some new volunteers would be great.
Make a plug for volunteers. Go ahead.
Yeah, please.
How do you volunteer?
Yeah, you can contact the board, actually. There's a list of openings on different committees, and talk to the board. And
Are there some cool committees that you would recommend?
I like conservation. I like rec. Library has trustees and friends of the library. So, any part of the town you can serve and get to know.
And nobody's overfilled right now.
No, I think we can always use new volunteers, yeah.
Chris?
I think the one thing you have to watch out, though, Dave, if you get people involved in the town stuff, is it can become addicting. You can find yourself being on one committee, but next thing you know, I started on CIP and Budget Advisory originally, and you get to the point where you go to them. I still faithfully go to all of those meetings. The amount of information that, and this may sound weird to people, but actually being on the BOS and still going to the Budget Advisory meetings, the amount of information that you still gain out of the Budget Advisory Committee is huge. So I think a lot of that any committee you do, I think actually is a good thing. But back to your original question as
And
far
let
as.
me, well, let me rephrase for you, because
Sure.
you're an incumbent. Instead of the next 3 years for them, what are you proud of over the last 3 years that you've done as an incumbent?
My biggest thing that I feel proud of that I have been consistent through the whole thing is transparency. No matter what I try and do, I always want to try and make it where everything is clear to the voters. People reach out, whether they call. I've been probably one of the few that I've ever seen that put their email and their phone number in the voter's guide. And you'd be shocked on how many people will call throughout the year and be like, well, I didn't know if you wanted me to call you. And my theory is my phone's on all the time. I strive to try and get back to everybody that I can. Obviously, depending on my work schedule, my meeting schedule, it becomes tough to get back to everybody. Sometimes I can't get back to people right away because they ask a question that's got to come in front of the board, and ultimately the board has to answer it. But I feel budgeting, I feel we've got a lot more transparency out of it. One of the things I'd like to do, whether I get back on the board or not, Dave, I had one year that I didn't get reelected. I think I made more meetings sitting in the audience after that. But one of the things that I want to do, and I look at it, and we've talked about it as a board at times, is going through, I kind of look at sometimes zero budgeting. Like sometimes I feel you don't have to do it every year. You don't have to start a budget. You don't have to start each department every year with a zero budget and build it up from that. But you should, in my eyes, go back every couple of years and say, okay, if you had to start your budget all over today, instead of just saying you fall under the 1%, 2%, 3%, whatever the budget's capped at, really let's redefine your budget, see where you're at. You may find that, hey, this budget's over, and you may find that, this budget actually hasn't been budgeting enough to actually accomplish what we need. So between that and revenues, like I said, going back to grants and trying to find a way for different money as far as grants and stuff like that, those are things I think that we really need to capitalize on.
I know all of you have talked to townspeople. In talking to townspeople, what have been some of their wants or needs for the town, and how would you address that? And anybody can start this conversation.
All of what I said comes from people that I've spoken to out wherever, whether it's out for breakfast or out
And
to
it's
lunch
just the
or out to dinner.
taxes and the housing and...
Taxes, housing, obviously the roads, the road situation we have going on, and that we need to invest more money in the roads. How do we get new businesses? We have conversations about how we bring new businesses in, and I truly think we should have a committee put together where that committee does nothing but focus on attracting new businesses.
Okay.
Yeah, I hear a lot about the roads, the water, and I think that as a town, we're working on that. I mean, we're working on replacing water mains, we're trying to increase our budget for paving, so it's a slow process, but we're getting there.
I hear a lot myself as far as I think it's due to the conversations that have been going on for the past year. A lot of it comes down to housing. And you hear mixed perception on it. You hear some people saying, we need more affordable housing in town. Affordable housing becomes a extremely difficult conversation. What is affordable housing? And really, who are you going to, you can't actually dictate that people build affordable housing. And let's face it, developers nowadays, they're going to go in and they're going to try and get market rate housing, because affordable housing, you don't build any cheaper than what you build market rate housing for. But on the other hand, I hear people that we need more places to live. But then on the other hand, you hear people talk about, what? It's getting more congested. Parking has been that notorious discussion in Milford. It was brought up tonight as far as driving around. We ran into it as a board. This year we ran into it tough as far as the winter parking ban. Anybody that watches Facebook, knows that there's a whole bunch of stuff on that. On, if we have the parking ban, where do you park? When you can't park on the road. But yet here we are. We have zoning amendments going forth to develop stuff stronger and higher density. But yet we don't have any more place to park.
Is the town prepared for like a downward turn in terms of the economy or an unexpected expense?
As far as expense, as far as in which?
Well, say earlier you were talking about that one $300,000 expense that you pay every 10
the
years.
payroll, yep.
Payroll. What happens if we have an economic downturn in terms of housing? What if we have an economic downturn in terms of a new expense that pops up? Maybe some of the pipes blow up and we have to really... Are we prepared for that?
Ultimately, we have, if you're talking catastrophic...
A contingency.
So Contingency fund is tough. You know, we have a bridge capital reserve fund. Like, let's say something happens to a bridge, but unfortunately, a bridge isn't something that's going to be fixed overnight. That's the problem with that. If you get into catastrophic stuff, we have what they know as fund balance, meaning unanticipated, or actually, it's just fund balance ultimately. Where we carry on average like $5 million in it. But those are meant for catastrophic stuff. That's not like a slush fund that we can go into. You know, ultimately there's ways that you have to go about to take money out of it, and it's either through the court system, through the legislative body voting on it. It's not something we can just tap into. So if you're looking at major expenses, you have that. You know, building wise, we have insurance. Water becomes a little bit different because water actually doesn't fall under the select board. Water falls under a whole different commission, wastewater and sewer. It's still under the umbrella of the town of Milford, but yet it's not covered by the Board of Selectmen.
Dave,
If we have, repeat your question one more. I want to make sure I answer it.
basically what I was wondering, if there was an unexpected expense or an economic downturn, how does the town, how as a town Board of Selectmen would we be able to?
Right, so based on what I heard at one of the last meetings, our budget is so tight that if there is a downturn and we have issues, we're gonna have big issues, we're gonna have to go back to the taxpayers. And that's not gonna go over well because the economy doesn't just hurt for the town, it hurts for the residents. So that's a really good question, and I think that should be addressed. We should have a fund that we don't have to go through the court system that we have, where we can go back and say, we have an emergency or we have a downturn, we need to go into this fund. So I don't think we're prepared, and I don't think I'm allowed to address those folks, so I won't. But I think we should have, so I'm not gonna ask the question, do we?
And obviously, as a CLO in the past, you probably had some types of contingencies.
100%. I mentioned it at a board meeting in the past, is that I would set up contingency funds for multiple reasons, whether we had a catastrophic event. Some of you know, some of you don't know, I was in the marijuana/cannabis market. If we had a garden that we had to kill, that's millions of dollars. So I had a fund set up where we could go grab, $3-4 million, reignite the garden. When I came, my other background, when it came from the restaurant industry, it's same thing. Not as big, but anywhere between $100,000 to $500,000 sitting in a fund, waiting for those kinds of events.
Vanessa, your
Yeah,
thoughts?
I mean, we just came through a downturn in our economy over the past 4 years, and we saw departments tighten their belts, cut where we could. So I think that we'll continue to do that, but also I think it's important to keep up the maintenance. We defer a lot of maintenance, and then we run into these emergencies. So I think that keeping up with our maintenance will really keep us from getting into trouble too.
Okay, and so then how do we balance our long-term goals versus some of our immediate needs? Do you feel that there's some immediate needs that we have, but then there's also some long-term goals that the town of Milford should have in your 3 years? No, Chris.
So I guess I'd love to start with that.
Sure.
Once again, going back to the capital improvement plan, and that is one thing that I would like to see changed. I'm going to say, regardless whether I'm on the board or not, just as a resident of Milford, we have had a tendency in Milford of focusing on long-term planning, on putting things on the CIP, but yet when we put them on, we're actually looking for them that year. There's not often that we're putting something on
Could you
saying
just define CIP for the viewers?
capital improvement planning.
Okay.
And sorry about that. Once again, when you get into this so deep at times, you think everybody else is in there with you. But so going on the CIP, we're supposed to be looking out 6 years as far as to basically stabilize the tax rate. And I think what we've been doing in the past is I think that we've all pretty much come to the realization that we haven't been doing it as effectively as what we could, because we typically only rank the year at hand. So yes, you have things that are farther out, but you don't have the impacts, you don't necessarily have the cost. So from a planning tool, I think that CIP would be better planned out on a longer term, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe that some of the new software that we've gone after is going to help mitigate those problems.
Thoughts?
Yeah, the CIP, they start even before the budget committee, so they get done with their reports right when we're starting our budget process. So I think that if we really use CIP like it's meant to be used, and planning out, 5, 6, 7 years will help the town greatly.
Wait, just one sec, Dave, on me asking you your thoughts. Are we stuck every year because of the town vote? I mean, does that have a major impact in terms of if the CIP can move forward?
CIP is going to move forward no matter what, because ultimately you're going to make a plan. And just because you have a plan, it doesn't necessarily mean that that whole plan is going to be enacted per se, because
You have to fund it.
you have to fund all of it. So what happens is those are your projected cost, your planned items, but yet it doesn't really have to do so much with budgeting. Going back to your question earlier, as far as, catastrophic, if something happens, municipal budgeting is actually weird on that, because when we go through and we do our budget of $21 million, at the end of the year, you know what we can't do? We can encumber money, I'm gonna call it like immediately over, for something that if we have like a contract or something in place to utilize that, a sales and purchase or something of that nature. But you just can't carry money in the municipal world from one year to the next. So it actually does become a problem of having a contingency on having a bulk of money sitting around, meaning that's beyond us, meaning that comes down to RSAs that we have to follow. So once again, it has to do on planning. Vanessa brought up a lot as far as we put off some of the stuff that we have as far as on maintenance. And we put it off, why? Because when we go through and we ask our finance director, say, okay, run all the numbers. Hey, by the way, can you do that tax impact sheet and show, what the estimated tax impact is? And when we see that, oh my goodness, that tax rate is up 19% over last year, that doesn't become palatable to people. So, I'm sure our finance director despises me, because I'm always like, hey, Troy, can you give me that number? Because I have to use that as a baseline for me to say, from the school to the town, we have the same pair of pants on, and we're pulling the school money and the town money out of the same pair of pants. And let's face it, we only all have so much money, so we got to find that balance somewhere.
Dave?
Yeah, so when we were talking about the economic downturn, we said we would tighten our belt, keep up on the maintenance and tighten our belt. What are we tightening our belt on, and what suffers because of tightening the belt? That would be my question. I don't know.
Yeah. What do you cut? What stays and what goes, right?
Right, but we said that we tightened our belt because we had it in the past. So what did we tighten our belt on? Okay, what did we do better? Right? What did we do better? Because that should impact next year's budget, unless something suffered so severely that we just said we're not doing this because we don't have the money to, because the impact was so great. Right? That would be my question.
Okay. And are there? Oh, go
I
ahead.
guess my question is, will I get an answer to that? If we in the past, because we have done it in the past, right? We had a downturn. We tightened our belt. We didn't do something that we normally would have done in the budget. What was that?
Well, every year it seems paving gets cut from DPW.
That's the only thing?
No, I mean, each department, working on the budget committee, each department goes back and relooks over their budget, see where they can, tighten up a little bit.
We sorry to interrupt.
I know
we-
I know we did that this year, and I know there was a lot of hard work done to go back and look at departments to tighten up those budgets. I don't know if we could have done more, or they did everything that they possibly could do. I would just like to know, back to David's point, was if we had an economic downturn and we said we were going to tighten our belts, and they did, what would suffer?
We've had years where we've actually,
Besides the roads.
we've had years where we've forgone police cruisers. We years ago, I can remember years when we had 2 in the budget, we had 2 in a warrant article, because we were trying to play catch up, because it had gone so much where they'd been reduced, and then it got to the point we made it back to 2 in the budget. And then I can't remember, I think we have 1 in the budget this year. So ultimately, that's still stuff. We've had trucks at DPW that we've put off. We've run trucks over 20 years in DPW. We've gone without fire gear, meaning without replacing some of the fire gear at the fire department. Don't get me wrong, when it really comes down to it, if you actually look at the town, we have 4 emergency services. We have police, ambulance, fire, DPW. And then we basically have what I'm going to use the term town services, meaning administrative, town hall, and whatnot. So your services that you have in town hall, it's kind of hard to cut. We don't have an excess of people. We have some departments that have one person in them. So if that person's out, whether they're out on PTO, whether at vacation, we've learned to cross. I want to use the term cross-train or cross-cover. I don't know what the appropriate term would be on it. but it's not like we have, as much as I would love to say, there's a whole lot I think that can come out of the budget. I don't think that there is. But when it really comes down to it, I've been the one in the past. If you look at, prior town voters guides, you'll see that I haven't supported the budget. Some of the times I don't support the budget because, I don't like how this was calculated. We showed a reduction where the police department, at one point, we had 2 open positions that literally we kept there, but we didn't fund them. So ultimately, the positions were left because we knew we couldn't hire anybody, because ultimately what you're hiring, you still got to put through the police academy and whatnot. But we had so many, we used fund balance. There was years from after COVID where we used, $1.2 million worth of fund balance money to offset the tax rate, which I believe in giving money back to the taxpayers. If we brought in more revenue, give it back. COVID was one of those situations where it's to go back. But you look at it this year, we weren't able for 26 projected. We weren't projecting to use any money to go back to the taxpayers. 25, we didn't use any money to go back to the taxpayers. Our fund balance is sitting at the levels that the state recommends they're at. And in truth, in my opinion, without making a long story, they're low. We actually should be building our fund balance higher for those emergencies like you're talking about.
Dave, go ahead.
No, you answered my question. So we didn't lose anything, except time. So we needed those 2 police cruisers. We delayed them a year or 2.
But yet we've done it with ambulances. We've stretched ambulances on replacement, meaning alls we do, and it's the famous term that I hate in Milford, and I wish we could kill the term, is kicking it down the road. That is what we've done.
Yeah.
And not often are you going to see me sitting here saying, we need to do this stuff, but we literally are getting to the point where we need to do it. There's so, look at the instances we've had over the last, we had the water that was leaking at the library, ultimately that we ended up getting fixed over there. We had the chimneys that we had to take down on Town Hall, 2 chimneys because they were falling. Those were things that were not planned for. So I guess if you ask what comes up, in reality, did anybody know there was something wrong with them? I don't know how often you guys look up when you drive around, but you start to see them leaning. It's stuff we got to deal with.
Well, in your eyes, do you believe that the budget is pretty trim right now? Even at $21 million, there's not a lot of excess because of the fixed costs of, insurances and fees and other things that you were saying that you were paying.
So I'm going to tell you what my hope is, Dave. Going forward next year, we should right off the top be able to save the $330,000 for the extra payroll. That's going to be a savings to us. We should end up having a savings because we're not going to be buying the initial cost of the software going forward. So that's going to save us some. We're going to be able to drop Munis, which is our accounting software. We're going with the new software, but when you start a new computer program, you got to run them simultaneously until you get one up and going. So ultimately, we're going to see a reduction there. We're going to see some reductions. Don't get me wrong. Are some of those reductions going to be filled back up? They probably will. But I guess in my hope on it is those reductions get filled back up, but maybe they don't exceed where we are now. So maybe next year we could come back to the voters and be like, here we are, guys. We got a 1% increase or a 0% increase. We're flat for a year. That's my hope. Unfortunately, prediction, do we know? We have more elections this year. There's so many more things that you can add in, and you think about it and you don't really think that they're much more. But when you look at, for the additional elections we have this year, that's like another $30-something thousand that people don't really think about. And I'm going to be honest, I don't really think about them. We just had to add it back into the default budget because it was figured, that's one of the mandatory things we have to do. We can't basically look at people and be like, hey, we're not doing the elections.
No elections.
Right.
Don't get me started. Dave.
Yes, sir.
So just kind of coming back a little bit of full circle, because I'm trying to get, where do you see immediate need? We talked long term, and yours was getting businesses back in and so on like that. But in terms of immediate need, is there any type of relief or anything that you feel that this town really kind of needs in the next 6 months, in the next year?
Define really. You said relief.
Well, relief meaning are there any programs or are there things that you would look to try to trim down?
I think 1, we go after all the grant money possible. 2, again, you got to do a forensic audit of the budget. That's just what you have to do. And I know that there's folks out there who are doing it, and Chris has seen it, and those who haven't, I've looked at our budget, and there's, based on budgets I've seen in the past, there's questions I have. It doesn't mean that it's wrong or that it's right. I just think for me, in my eyes, I would have to see it and go over it and understand it to be able to say we could trim or not trim, or ask the questions, can we trim or not trim? I do think there's other avenues, i.e. business, i.e. grants, that we could bring in other revenue. Maybe it isn't all at the budget. Maybe I'm just fixated on the budget right now because that's my background and what I do in managing people. So I would say we go after the grants, we go after businesses. I'm still stuck on maybe we should create that committee to go out and find businesses and bring them to Milford and do a dog and pony show through Milford and show them the awesomeness of this town to see if they're willing to come plant here and help the tax base.
All right. Vanessa, what makes you proud to be a Milfordite?
I think that what makes me most proud is our history. We have, the Paul Revere Bell, we have our parades, we have our pumpkin festival, our flag placement ceremonies. I'm proud of the volunteers we have and just that strong community we have. A few months ago, how the town came together to support Papa Joe and his family. I don't think that there was one billboard in town that didn't have, praying for you, thinking of you, Papa Joe, we're here for you. So those are the kinds of things that really make me proud.
Chris?
The small town feel is one thing that makes me proud. The staff, when you look at a lot of our staff, I feel we have a real lot of staff that actually lives in Milford. We do have some that lives in other communities, but even the ones that live in the other communities actually have like an attachment to Milford when it really comes down to it.
You said 90% or 80% of the people go outside of Milford.
Correct.
So we're that 10% that can't leave, is that what you're saying?
If you look at the staff, we have some staff that's worked for the town that literally have worked for the town for over 40 years.
Yeah.
So to me, like that sense of community, I guess I just feel everybody, it sometimes is a blessing and a demon at the same time. Milford is so great, it's so small, it's so tight-knit. The unfortunate part is you can have something that can happen by Shaw's. And 10 minutes later, you can be at Market Basket, and everybody already knows what happened down the other end of town. Like, everything is just so tight-knit, and you'd be shocked who comes out of the woodwork and actually is willing to help people in time of need. And I think that's a huge thing in Milford.
Dave?
Yeah, I think it's my neighbors. It's anybody that I walk around the Oval and get to bump into and just say hi. I'm one to talk to strangers. People look at me like I'm a little bit cuckoo, but I do. There's an atmosphere. It still has the small town atmosphere, and I think that's what we all want to protect. That's what we all like. I think all of us, a good percentage of us, like that small town feel, to where we can walk around the Oval and have a conversation about the Yanko Camaro that 101 owns,
Chip
right?
has.
I could bring my car down there or anywhere and have it seen, and people walk up and say, "Hey, Dave, I know you from this or that or whatever." I had that in Merrimack until it really started to explode. So that's how do we protect that? How do we keep it small, but also bring in the revenue to make it affordable?
Okay, so
That makes me proud and gives a lot of thought at the same time.
excellent. So you get elected. What is going to define success for you after 3 years? What would you define as success as a selectman at the end of the third year?
As a leader in a company, that's always the question, is how do you define success? Is it all these wins? Is it all this money? I think success for me would be looking in the audience of a meeting and having to move it upstairs because we have gotten the town folks so excited to come to these meetings and be a part of the process that we're upstairs and we're expanding the meeting that way. I also think, helping change a little bit of the culture that more to the positive for the town of Milford, that's how I would measure success.
So you would be a huge advocate for the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence and all the great activities that this town
100%. I'm a proud American. There's the American flag right there. Yes.
All right, shameless plug,
Yes.
plug. Vanessa, how do you define success at the end of the third year?
Yeah, well, because the board really oversees the budget and puts the budget together, keeping our budgets flat, keeping our employees. I know that there tends to be a turnover because employees leave to go to other municipalities because of pay and benefits. So really continuing to look at our employees, keeping them, training new ones. I know that there's a number of them that could be retiring soon, so make sure that we have people that we're training to take those positions. Being transparent, we represent the residents, so representing them well would be successful for me.
Fantastic. Chris?
To continue the success that I actually like to see is I call it communication. And it's communication whether residents reach out, whether it be through email, whether it's through phone call, whether it's not even to me and it's to the town administrator, whether it's to me, it's to get people involved. I just feel that, residents call me, they ask me a question, I try and get them an answer as fast as I can. Sometimes I know it off the top of my head. Sometimes I got to go dig for it. There's still questions out there that I haven't answered for some people because I don't know if an answer exists on some of them. But I've never given up on looking for it. The transparency thing to me is vital. Staff is extremely important to me. I have been, I'm going to call it lucky, but yet cursed at the same time. I've had staff reach out to me in the past, and I feel that they reach out in confidence and they say, hey, what about this? What about that? But to me, it makes me feel, at least they feel that I'm approachable, that they feel that I can try and make things move in a positive direction.
And let me just add on to that for you. I think when we first met 6 years ago, one of your platforms was transparency, and you were a little bit miffed that there wasn't enough transparency back then. Between then and now, where have we become more transparent? What have you championed, or what do you say?
From transparency, I feel, and it's not just myself.
No, I know.
It's collectively as a board. I just don't want people to think that I'm saying it's just me.
But we've heard it a couple times.
But I feel the transparency comes down to what you're putting out, what you're discussing at boards, whether it be agendas, whether it be packets, whether it be where the money's spent, whether it be this new ClearGov program that's going to come out that actually is going to be a computer program that is going to actually spell stuff out almost in real time on what gets spent and where it gets spent. I feel there's so many things before from our right to know policy. Our right to know, we didn't have a right to know policy at one point, which has progressed. And you'd like to hope that you don't need a right to know. You'd like to hope you don't need to utilize the right to know process, because you'd like to hope that people can come to the board and whatever. But I feel the requests that come in now, they get answered in a much timelier fashion than what they did before. I just think information is a huge thing. Once again, this is all of us together. So to me, I feel whether you're paying, a $4,000 tax bill or a $14,000 tax bill, we all have the same right to the information to know what's going on. And I just think that, like I said, being truthful, upfront, open with everybody was, and will always become my most important goal to have.
Any ideas on transparency, or are you good with that?
Ideas?
Thoughts.
Chris and I have spoken in length. I think that transparency, honesty, integrity, sitting on any board or any place where you have influence is super important. And we owe every single resident that just a little bit of transparency. Be honest. Be open. Let them know what we know. Let them know what they want to know. Period.
And I think that the town has been doing a great job over the years, making things available online for the residents. Our meetings are televised now. You don't even have to come in person to see what's being talked about.
You have to post in 2 places now, right? 2 public places.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so,
That's crazy things.
and with the new software coming, that's going to even help even more, so.
I'm going to be winding down. I just want to know, before we do closings, are there any topics or thoughts that you may have that we haven't discussed tonight that you'd like the voters to consider about yourself or about your thoughts on the town? Is there anything I didn't bring up to you, like, I wish he brought that up, or I wanted to speak to that?
I don't think there's anything that jumps from me.
Yeah, I don't think
I
so.
feel like we've talked voting, we've talked taxes, we've talked vision, we've talked...
I think if there was anything that I just wanted to touch upon again, just so that all the voters realize, and I don't think this becomes any advantageous to myself or any of the other candidates, is like with our reassessment and the focus on taxes. Everybody just keep in mind, when we get our reassessment, we're all going to be reassessed to 100%, or as close to the 100% as we can get, and we're all going to be paying the same tax rate. Because our assessment goes up, don't think that your tax bill is going to go up, because ultimately, statistically, when your assessment goes up, your tax rate goes down. So in theory, we're still, if the budget was identical for next year, we're still going to be raising the same amount of money overall. It's not like when the assessments go up, we're going to be collecting more taxable dollars. I guess that would be the biggest thing.
That's the takeaway.
I feel voter education, I think, is huge. It's the biggest thing you can come across.
Preaching to the choir. All right, well, let's have some closing then, and if there is anything that I missed or that you didn't want to bring up, you can pull it in your closing. We started with Chris, let's start with Dave as our closing.
Yeah, I'd like to just thank you for doing what you do. I think this is the third time I've had the opportunity to sit in front of you and take questions. Chris, thank you. Vanessa, thank you. Thank you to those folks out there. And I just look forward to, the process and, my desire to, help the town of Milford keep its small town feel, manage the tax situation, and listen to the voters or the residents' voters, and follow through what they would like to see Milford become, as well as what we would like to see Milford become.
Fantastic, Vanessa.
Yeah. As a member of the Select Board, I will focus on fiscal prudence while emphasizing the need to seek new revenue streams to lighten the load of the taxpayers. We need to be smart about how we grow and seek efficiencies where we can. I'm eager to help solve any challenges that come up, and I'm committed to shaping Milford's future, making this a place for many to call home for generations to come.
All right. Christopher.
And I guess I'll close out basically reiterating the same thing I said tonight. If I have the privilege of being reelected again, like I said, transparency, trust and verify. There's so many things that I keep looking back at that Milford has come so far, and I feel that if we can keep on this, not so much as like raising taxes, but if we can actually look through and responsibly go through, spend our money, keep up our infrastructure, and keep Milford what it is. We still always have to progress. We're still always going to have, building and whatnot, because let's face it, if you own land and you want to develop it in town, that's your right. But once again, we have to do it in a responsible fashion. And I just think we have to be respectful, responsible, and effective in our choices that we do.
Okay, and speaking of choices, I want to thank all three of you. I've done a number of forums. I've done a number of forums outside of Milford. And it fills my heart that we have three amazing candidates that I am so comfortable with, that I feel are viable choices to be a selectman here in our town. As you know, there's 2 open seats. Voting is on March 10th from 6 in the morning to 8 o'clock at night at Milford High School. So please get up there. We alluded earlier how we have a little bit of low numbers. This could be the motivator to get you out, because it is a challenged seat. There's actually 2 out of 3. So please come on out. Let's try to get some record numbers. I'm sure there'll be great treats offered up there, if not just amazing dialogue and conversation with lots of town folk. It does bring out some of the best. So I thank the three of you. I always go back to de Tocqueville with Democracy in America, and how he was so impressed with the voluntary organizations, which, as you stated earlier, 2,500 and 3,000. It is a voluntary organization that you're doing. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart to do what makes this town right. Please come out and vote. Thank you, 3 candidates, for coming out tonight. And thank you, audience, for being here tonight. Thank you.
Put one more plug out, Dave?
Put one more plug out.
I noticed today on the town website that our voters guide is up.
Please come get the voters guide. It's got lots of great stuff.
That
and
it's on the
photos.
website.
Oh, it's on the website.
As of right now, it will be mailed out, but I saw it live today on the website. So.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you all.